Okay. I believe we are online, live from, well, from the world to the world because we are all located in different states here in the United States and as well as Brazil and other countries. So, hello to everybody. My name is Adriana and I'm speaking here from Sacramento, California. Welcoming you all to one more blessed meeting from here, the Bezerra Spiritual Healing Virtual Center to the world. Thank you so much for connecting with us here as a family, and as well as allowing yourselves to connect with your guardian angels, with your mentors to receive the messages. Today, we have a special guest, our dear friend and sister Nora, who will be speaking with us here shortly and sharing her knowledge and on a specific topic that I will share very briefly with you guys soon. But before we start our meeting today, I would like to ask our dear broad Mark to open our session with the opening prayer. Pretty please. Thank you, Mark.
Dear Adriana, I ask you all to, if appropriate, close your eyes and center yourself with slow, deliberate breath. If possible, your feet squarely on the floor and becoming one with the earth. Our Creator, we thank you for this amazing life on this incredible planet, filled with wonders and joys every day. We thank you for the challenges which allow us to appreciate those joys. We thank you for the opportunities to be of service to others. We ask that you continue to bless this group and its spiritual mission, the mentors who guide us individually and collectively, and those that come to learn alongside us. We ask the speaker to feel the positivity emanating through the airwaves and the energies of support and eagerness to receive and learn. And we humbly request permission to begin today's session. And so be it.
So it is. Thank you, Mark and friends, for this moment of silence and connection with the higher beings to support us, guide us throughout this blessed moment that we are here together for, to learn to educate ourselves and to hopefully evolve every time, every day. Well, for those new to the Bezerra Spiritual Healing, welcome. And for those who are familiar with our service, welcome back. Again, thank you so much for your time in connecting and really dedicate that one moment for your own evolution. It's very important and so much needed, especially nowadays. It's good to be together and in as a family, pray for our country, for ourselves, for our families, and for all in the world, our Mother Earth, and all the planets that is part of our beautiful universe. So, Bezerra Spiritual Healing Center has many activities going on, educational pieces as well as prayers, and I'll share with you guys the agenda. And we always start we have two sessions. The first one, which is happening as of we speak, it's more about the educational piece. We always have a guest speaker who is going to talk about a specific topic, which will definitely help us educate us in the spiritism realm. And then the second part, it's a beautiful meditation when we do what we say, the healing, hands-on healing, where you do receive and you give your love, your time, your prayers to others in need, as well as you receive, because the more we give, the more we receive, right? But for the education pieces here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys, which is basically a very important source. I wonder if you guys are seeing my screen here, but this is the Brazilian, or I mean, Bezerra Spiritual Healing Center, bshcenter.org. And here are the events, all the meetings and events that our center hosts. Um, so for example, here, as you can see, we have the Zoom link. That's pretty easy to participate in the services that are offered. So for example, here on Sunday today, we have the, educational presentation and then the healing passes, the second portion of it. We also have daily prayers at 6 p.m. Okay, typically around 15 to 20 minutes. So you are more than welcome and you are invited to join us to create that chain of prayer, support, and love. For the fraternal counseling, it's by appointment only, and you can fill out a form online as well. Or you can let us know if there's a specific time that you would like to meet with one of us for a personal fraternal counseling. Usually, this takes place from 4 to 7 on Wednesdays. And then for the book study groups, we have different groups being studied. But for example, here on Sundays, there is The Messengers by Chico Xavier, Via Spirit, André Luiz. On Tuesday, which started actually in April, The Consoler by Chico Xavier via Emmanuel as well. This special studies is in collaboration with Divine Light Spiritist group led by our sister Sunshine. On Wednesdays, Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. Thursdays, Living Spring by Chico Xavier again via Spirit Emmanuel. These study groups here, as you can see, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, they study at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and they last about an hour. And you are welcome to join even if you haven't started from the beginning, uh, because you always learn, I should say, something as you participate. They also have the mediumship starts at 6:30 on Mondays, about an hour. Again, this is not open for the public yet, just because the mediumship component, some of us here are working on expanding the mediumship. Therefore, they are working on that piece for some of the members that are in that level of work. But all this to say that in our website, bshcenter.org, you can always use the Zoom link that is available to you all. And there are also other uh, educational pieces here, like for example, the link for the BSH library, which also gives you access to all the YouTube videos. For example, this one is going to be online available for those who are not available to be present at the moment, but they can definitely listen to the lectures via our YouTube channel here. Beautiful. So, and again, just thank all the volunteers to put this beautiful website together. As you know, we are a nonprofit organization here based on the work of the volunteers who are with much love contributing to make sure that we have all those meetings, everything is organized. And if you have not yet subscribed to receive our letter, I would like to invite you to do so, or you can send us a message here on the chat box and we can add you to our newsletter with all the information, all the links, and additional resources that including, by the way, is available here on our website um, for you to learn more about spiritism at your leisure. So beautiful prayers, as well as different ways that you can learn more about the spiritism and other topics related. All right. Beautiful. Okay, my friends. So, with that said, and without further ado, we are all excited here because we have our sister Norah Brasil. Love that name. I know I'm biased, but hey, I have to say it with a smile in my face. Norah Brasil. She's going to be speaking about role of spirits in natural phenomena and during wars. Again, very important. I'm sure this is not only the physical war, but maybe the political war and that type of environment that we may be, in our current administration going on right now. So we need a lot of, you know, information. And a little bit about Nora. Nora, she was saying here that Spiritism has made Nora's days much more fun, interesting, and meaningful, sparking question about life and who we are. All the philosophical good questions, right, Nora? Nora works with children as a middle school teacher, which I much appreciate having a little one myself here and trying to teach and learn with him. Nora also participates on the Kardec Radio weekly shows. By the way, another great resource for those who are available and interested in learning more. She is deeply grateful to BSH and for this opportunity to continue learning together. And we are grateful to you, Nora, for being here with us not only today, but taking our time to educating ourselves and to be able to share with us the knowledges about the role of spirits in natural phenomena and during wars. Without further ado, my friend, the stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Gosh, it's so lovely. Thank you. I'm pretty nervous. I haven't seen you on quite a while, so it's super nice to see everyone. Um, After working on the slides, the natural phenomena will take a big chunk, so we might not be able to actually finish that today. But if not, it's a very open conversation because I think the natural phenomena has beautiful, beautiful lessons for us to absolutely learn, which they actually have a lot of history, a lot of anthropology, psychology, probably will lead into conversations of nowadays and how we can grow and learn. I do have my son. I see your baby. I have one too, but he's a furry, four paws. If he does bark, I might have to. I'll put the mute here. You guys can talk while I go put him. Right now, he's quiet, just to let you know. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen because we have a lot of stuff different. Okay, how do I do this? I haven't done this in a long time. Okay, so we're gonna start with the spirits in the natural phenomenal questions 536 to 540. And really, this has to do with natural disasters, just to kind of get us into that idea. These are just some examples of the stuff that unfortunately, right, we come across. So it's very tangible, it's a very visible manifestation. And this is Mother Earth, right? And we're sort of all into it. And excuse me, we're all into this. So, of course, we have the floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, droughts, um, earthquakes, uh, the extinctions, right, of species. We have a lot of pollution, a lot of the tornadoes. There was a lot of stuff going on recently. Even here in Texas, we actually had a tornado watch. We recently just dealing with the biological and health pandemics and the plagues, not only in history, but even today, which we're going to kind of look into, and the wildfires that some of y'all in California too are dealing with this. So these are like things where I'm sure, and I remember even too studying in my science and my geography classes, like I would ask myself, like, where does God, where is he, right? Like, where does he come in the picture? And of course, these are the more elevated versions of it. But when we were young, we asked, why is God doing this, right? How come, where is he when the earth is shaking and lives are being lost? Why is God silent? Is he being silent? Is he trying to speak to us? Why are people suffering more, right? That's a big question. Is this nature? Is it being fair? Is it being unfair? And I guess now, since this is a spiritual platform, right? The biggest question is, as we're studying at the end of this, these questions, do they reveal a weakness or are they awakening some sort of strength, right? So a lot of these questions, there's no right or wrong answer. And as a matter of fact, as I was digging to this, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much. But at least from the moment we start with this, and hopefully at the end, we could leave with something um, to just take with us in our lives and to try to understand. Okay, so because the questions are long or anything. This is kind of like the condensed version of it. So read the questions, and then we'll do the paraphrase answer, and then it'll get us into the topic more specifically and closely. So question 536 asks, are natural disasters random? Spirits say, nope. They are occurring with God's permission. Some are affecting humanity, and the others are for Mother Earth, right, to restore her balance. Questions 537. Were ancient gods real, right? And this is a relationship to the disasters, which we'll get into more later. And the spirits answer no. Ancient people mistook spirits for gods, but the spiritual forces at that time, they were sensed, but they were misunderstood. Question 538. Are these spirits a special type? No, absolutely not. Going back to the ancient gods, right? And the spirit says, no, they're actually spirits like us, some more evolved and some less, but they're helping according to their development. Question 539. Does one spirit control a natural event? Actually, no. The spirits say countless spirits work together to influence this natural phenomenon like the storms and the earthquakes. And finally, question 540, to wrap up this section of the questions, do spirits act with awareness? And it's interesting, some do, right? And some are actually like they're very unconscious to it. They don't even realize that they're taking a part in this. So let's break this apart. And we're actually going to start with question 537 to start kind of with the historical aspect and then lead us into the more current perspectives on natural disasters, right? So ancient gods and natural disasters. One of the things that we can see here as the spirits answer, they kind of clarify that ancient myths were mistaken in worshiping natural spirits as God. But that feeling, right, that the ancient people had in us, and we were incarnated at that time as well, that something invisible and powerful was behind nature, and it wasn't entirely wrong. The spirits never judged it, never said, nope, nope. They just misunderstood. We can infer at that time, right? They lacked the language, the context, the understanding. And as a matter of fact, gonna add a little thing there as we're making inference till today, although our understanding has been expanding, we're still in the process, right? So it's beautiful because the way that the spirits answer, we come to see, okay, you know what? This is actually opening a door to something that many of us have been sensing today, just like in ancient times. Therefore, this could possibly even further open us to this possibility that Earth has received help before, right? During those times, not from the gods. So there was a natural disaster. Everybody, oh, it was a god that was punishing. Actually, no. The spirits want to invite us to think beyond that and say these were actually evolved beings, right? So, this is the time to just take a little breather and ask ourselves a couple of questions because it is a very heavy question and answer. So, if there were evolved beings that have helped humanity before, what traces have they left behind for us today? Okay. Now, these legends of gods, could they actually be misunderstood with encounters of advanced intelligences back in that time, right? Why were so many of these ancient civilizations aligned with the stars, and what does that imply? Another question is, how does the idea of evolved beings challenge, right, or complement our spiritual beliefs nowadays as we're going into this? And lastly, another question we can think about. If help came before, would we even recognize it today? Or would we dismiss it as myth or madness? And that's a huge question. But before we kind of come back as a group to look at these, let's look at some of those gods that, used to be here when there was a phenomenon like a flood or something, and the civilization at that time would say, oh, it's a god. So let's start with the Nomo, which is from Mali. And here, these are all AI generated, the versions, just to see a little bit of how it just is, right? So obviously some of these, we don't really have a record of it, but based on the descriptions left by some of these artifacts that they actually got, we can sense a more open version to it. So these guys were believed, and they actually said that they heard like this sky vessel, right? Which vessel, excuse me, which makes us think. And they would come and they would hear this great sound and trembling. And people at that time, they thought, is that an earthquake? Is that a sonic boom? And at that time, that arrival was linked to like a meteor or common events, and they were associated with celestial omens or disasters. It was this huge noise that they would make that thought was related to a natural phenomenon. Now, today, we could get into a beautiful conversation, right, with uh, with aliens, if we want to call them, and what that meant. But in the spiritual perspective, being open to this, okay, not to sound like a conspiracy theory, because it's not, because these records were there. What if at this time these beings or these energies or whatever it was, they were simply here to guide humanity's early development, whatever it was, right? So it was something really interesting. They were actually they were actually revered to be right here as divine teachers, which was really interesting to see that. Another god, right, that was probably more well known is thought, right, that from the Egyptian culture. We know that he was huge and he was actually known at that time as the god of wisdom, the writing and time. He was credited for hieroglyphics and spiritual law. But relating this to when it came to natural disasters, he was the one that they thought at that time, they saw him as measuring time and the moon. His presence was evoked during the annual Nile flood. So the flood was necessary. Though the flood was necessary, any major deviation, too much or too little, was seen as a divine judgment or an imbalance, right? So here again, we have this entity that was created at that time. They felt those effects. But what if this really was just some form of energy or evolved spirit form that was evolving and changing the way that knowledge was at that time? Just things for us to think about. Then we have the book of Enoch, right, which is a very interesting. And we see that at that time, these angels, represented the forbidden, right, the everything. And if you really look into more of this, there's a lot of talk of how some of those biblical scholars, they took that book out, right, because what was in there was too, it was too like maybe outside the box, I could say. It was really out there. But believe it or not, at that time, if we go by this book and we stay open to this energy, they thought that the descent and the corruption was led to a moral crisis, right? So it resulted like in the Great Flood, which we can see what the flood created. But what if we were to say that this energy was to remind humanity that there needs to be the spirits of mixed order? Some are rebellious and some are in line with divine law. So maybe like we have a little bit of everything and we have to figure it out. Of course, the Greek Prometheus, who was huge, and they thought that, he came and he saved humanity. So he was a big, big, big person in Greek mythology, thought to really be like to come and save humanity. Literally, he tricked Zeus, right? And he really advocates for humans at that time. So that's why he was very much related to like fire and the floods and all of that. But today, maybe his energy, his icon could represent a benevolent spirit guiding through human progress, right? So we start to see, as we start to delve into these ancient gods, and it's tough because we've been conditioned, right, to see this too as a conspiracy. But if we see it from a spiritual lens and we start to make connections, whatever our belief is, one thing we're starting to see, each of these, they're not, we've made them so magical and so mystical and so big, but the lessons are so, like, I don't know, they make sense, right? And again, because today we have that communication, we have everything. There's this other beautiful one. This one I actually learned through this study, and this is up from Persia. I'm not even gonna be able to say the name. I'm sorry. Ramasta and Zoroaster. And so this was beautiful because they were They receive like revelations from a divine source, like teaching duality, good versus evil, free will and truth. Beautiful. From a historical aspect, some of this religion still exists. From my understanding, it's beautiful, beautiful. But looking at it from a perspective, they saw this as a huge thing because Zoroastrian texts describe a cosmic struggle involving floods, fire, and purification of the world. So natural disasters during that time were viewed as symbolic battles between the good and the evil, with fire playing a central role, right? So again, maybe our understanding today is to realize that this particular ancient myth, God, whatever you want to call it, it was really to help us elevate that moral understanding because they have beautiful thoughts behind them. This one's from India, from Hinduism. Okay, so the Matsya, this god, they said that he looked like a fish, right? And of course, he warns of catastrophic floods to cleanse the earth. And we see that perhaps this energy, this belief, it's really to assign to preserve, to remind us to preserve spiritual and biological evolution during planetary change. Coming to North America, those Native Americans too, they had beautiful ancient um, myth, gods or beings that they would use as well. So Lakota, which was culture, they had this white buffalo calf woman, very sacred woman who brought spiritual ceremonies and the sacred pipe. They promised to return during global crisis. So her arrival comes at an important time because they would go through drought, famine, and moral decay. But when she was in the picture, we could say, right, somehow it would help them, right? So her high order spirit energy was delivering this moral and lost spiritual tools in need of time. So, right, like hope, which is beautiful. We can go also as a last one of the last ones. Of course, there's many more, but this is some of the major ones from different cultures. Okay, in Mexico, we have the Quetzalcoatl. I can't say it. And my gosh, so this was actually a god that was worshipped for wind and wisdom. He was had believed, right, in their community, he created humanity, but he was important because he was associated with celestial signs, volcanic eruptions, powerful winds, right, these natural disasters. But today, our spiritual frame might give us this understanding that this energy, or if whatever we believe, right, he really has this evolved missionary spirit energy to uplift humanity through teachings of peace, ethics, and balance, right? His cycle of descent, guidance, and departure symbolizes spiritual transformation and renewal. So there's a lot of these icons, right, in our history that really evolve. So I'm gonna take a deep breath because we went through a lot. I'm gonna go back to some questions. And I want to see if anybody, just because like we need a breather, if we want to tackle one of these questions after seeing a little bit of those slides. Do you all want me to stop sharing the screen, or do you have some comments, or do I leave the questions? Hello?
Keep going, girl. This is good.
Leave the questions, definitely.
Okay, we can review them at the end then. You want to review them at the end?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
I just want to make sure you're there because I can't see. I'm like, okay, we need a breather. Okay, so this actually takes us into something a little bit out there because we're talking about like physical um, phenomena, right? The natural disasters. And I said, it would be something crazy to think about, just to shake it up a little bit. What about if we were to do like a spiritual category of like phenomena out there and see what's up and see what we find? There's actually some real interesting global, right? And again, the key word here is to look at this because yes, we're gonna see how our part too works individually, but this is more of like a collective lesson, I think. And in the Middle East, around 1300 BC, we have those biblical plagues in Egypt that, again, here we're going to see how the beliefs come in the picture. They were seen as punishments, as awakenings. So that was really interesting. And again, we could talk about this later. In Greece, the Oracle of the Delphi, right? Those were related to spiritual guidance, political decisions. So the political, like, how was that taken into consideration? Because these were huge, huge deals. The Aztec human sacrifices, that was a huge phenomenon that happened in the culture. I actually happened to, I went to Chichen Itza a couple years ago, went to the pyramids, and it was crazy to think that they were actually like the way it was structured, and there was this like a court, I think. And in there, you can actually, the tour guide tells you there was like sacrifices, and they were really rough. There was a lot of mass ritual killings at that time, right? So again, these huge, massive, global things at that time in the community really affected them. We have actually the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. So what about those beliefs of afterlife and how that affected the bureau rituals, right? So we still see some of these bigger global events, right? Or in the capacity, we could say, of the community and how it really changed the things, the decisions that were happening. We actually have some other ones that maybe are a little bit more current in time, just to see, okay, like, I love the history, but what about now? So of course, a big one was the Salem witch trials. That was huge, right? They even have a play, they have a bunch of movies on that. Um, and that moral panic that happened, it was crazy. Like, some people, just because, if you know the history, just because you knew, you looked a certain way, you spoke a certain way, automatically you were, you were a witch at that time. And again, we see the spiritual development that deals with the phenomena. This one, I don't know too much about it, but I wanted to bring like maybe something from Brazil. It's called the War of Canudos. Maybe y'all can talk about it, but it talked a little bit about that spiritual rebellion and martyrdom that happened. We have the Magi rebellion that happens, the faith in spiritual protection turned tragic under colonial brutality. So we had a lot of that colonialism, right? The colonization. Um, Let's look to the dancing plague. That one's funny. So at that time in France, people were getting into this kind of trance-like state, and they were just like dancing, like a psychosocial trauma response. So we can see how sometimes too, right? We have these massive things going on, and our brains will take the direction. Oh, he's doing it, so then I'm feeling it, which we could actually kind of. And this again, this is my personal perspective on this. The Salem witch trials, that kind of happened too, I think. Um, the Jonestown massacre in I think it's South America, Guyana, yes. The cult, right? There's this cult, and then what happens, right? We've had those here in the U.S. as well, working again with that. Thank God that those don't go mass because, but it does go in certain communities where people will do crazy things, right? Um, the persecution of Yazidis by ISIS, again, genocide rooted, right, all towards a belief system, like who is right, who is wrong, like in the Middle East. That has been a big carrier thing for us to kind of learn a little bit about that. And even I thought this was interesting in the Caribbean Haitian voodoo persecution. Colonial powers demonized indigenous spirituality, leading to violence and suppression. So these are more current, but we see again this mindset and how, I mean, it's hard to answer, right? Like what's right, what's wrong, what's happening. But if anything, looking at our past, some of these past and these present kind of spiritual bigger phenomena, they evolve. They have different parts, different components, right? We can learn from. We can probably pick one and learn so much. And I mean, that puts a lot of thought for us to think about. So to kind of wrap this up, so ancient people, right? They saw natural forces and imagined gods. This is straight from paraphrasing what the spirits say, right? And they told us, hey, these weren't gods, right? You could see them as energies, or if we believe whatever we are in our spiritual evolution. Some people really do believe in these gods and stuff. There's a lot of studies out there, right? But this wasn't like the god, right? These were evolved spirits that were helping planet Earth or helping humanity. I have heard that in different channels about that. It would be interesting for us to talk about it. It's not mythical, it's purposeful. And just like everything else in creation, right, they're learning and evolving too. So, yes, humans were here, we know plants, animals, but there are also other beings, right? Like we know in Spiritism, they've talked about different types of creations that are more evolved, less evolved. So, we're all a universal family. So, taking in that, when phenomena come in, they mean something for us. Now, a big question for us to ask ourselves: how should we approach these ancient entities now that we understand that they're not gods but spirits in evolution, right? And do you think Kardec and the spirits wanted us to believe in these entities or to understand nature and spiritual growth in a new way through these natural phenomena and God? So, again, just we'll keep thinking, and hopefully we'll have time to talk. But that's how things were kind of like that in the past. Now let's hop a little bit to understand, going back to the question, well, why do like those things happen today? There's gonna be a list at the end with all sorts of natural disasters, all sorts. But we're just gonna kind of use one to kind of help us go through it. And I chose one that was very interesting, a little bit older, and I did not choose COVID. I wanted to choose something maybe a little bit less, um, because the COVID we're still studying. I'm still studying. I was like, no, but Hurricane Katrina. It's very, very interesting, believe it or not. It's already in the past, so we have enough information um, to kind of look back over 10 years, get everything kind of what happened. Now we know that this was one of the deadliest hurricanes in the US history. Over 1,800 lives were lost. But what's so interesting, thinking about it, what did we see this? We see Black and low income communities, right? Minorities. They were super disproportionately affected by this. So when this hurricane hits, boom, here we are. These are the people that have suffered. We see that widespread trauma, particularly among marginalized communities. What did it expose? Systemic injustice, poverty, racism, poor infrastructure that needed to be addressed. In one of my courses that I took, we actually went into detail about how everything here it went all wrong, right? But what was so interesting is the places that it actually hit, even the where people buy property, right? They make it so affordable so that lower income communities can buy it. And that's okay because then the people that have more means of purchasing land will either be in places a little bit further or might not be affected so much if the hurricane hits, or they'll have the correct infrastructure in where they live. So it was a sad thing to see, but again, choosing a natural disaster that's had time to be researched in different ways has really been an eye-opener for this. At that time, emergency response was really slow. It was chaotic. It exposed the deep, as we're going to go again, systematic inequalities in housing, health, and infrastructure. So, if anything, we learned from this the importance of equity, right, in preparedness and response to these natural disasters. At that time, the White House at that time with President George Bush in 2005, it was really interesting um, because he had this report. Unfortunately, we won't have time to go over it. But as they were preparing it, they learned 17 things, right? There are 17 challenges, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what does that have to do with us today? Well, today we're kind of seeing more of that spiritual phenomena, that spiritual aspect. So there's three things here I feel could be related to kind of like what the spirits are trying to tell us, right? The first critical challenge that, the government at that time was mentioning was this environmental hazards and debris removal. And it was interesting to learn, right? They learned that it's important to plan and coordinate to remove the debris after the disaster and everything that happens. Well, there's Mother Earth, right? I mean, she's part of this too. We're talking about natural disasters. So we think, wow, is Mother Earth kind of like talking to us in this sense, right? Could her or his energy or it energy just kind of be in there and put itself through it? Because, government is also important for growth. So I thought it was really interesting. Um, Another thing that happened during Katrina, right? Well, it was a mess. Like there's not everybody was there. It was really really sad. But we're gonna focus on the good here because they learned that like NGOs, right, or non-governmental organizations were huge. The community, or you can even say like the private sectors and businesses. My gosh, they were the ones that kind of came out. Now, look at that beautiful thing, right? That's huge. While yes, it was a challenge and part of the government. Well, wait a minute. So here we have this disaster, and it brought out, all of those stakeholders that have a huge part as well in the communities. And it's so beautiful. And actually, this not only happens in Katrina, we have the 9/11, COVID, so many other things, right? War. If we have time, we'll get into it. But if not, we see how a lot of this non-governmental aid, it's really the community advocating. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we see as it's evolving, right? We also know that one of the challenges as they were studying this disaster was the human services. It was really bad. Um, they just didn't know what to do. It was not organized for several reasons, right? Well, guess what? They said, you know what if we set a department for this to sort of be able to design a system to provide victims a consumer-oriented, simple, effective, and single encounter from which they can receive assistance. So opening up more opportunities for people, of these demographics, to be helped. So we see these very three things out of the 17. Wow, they're so profound and they're very spiritual in nature, even though it's in a government page. I thought, well, this is absolutely something to kind of think about. And you're like, oh, well, okay, now this right here, it's isn't hope without action, right? Because we're seeing kind of like the ancient times. If there was a phenomena, they would maybe create an energy, or if there is a God, if somebody believes, that's fine, right? But today, in more modern versions, we kind of see like Katrina is like, hey, this is support, this is evidence, there's data. Now we have this, like, we need to look for change. We need to make that change in our laws, in the politics, in our communities, within our relationships and everything. And again, let's take a little breather, ask yourself a question. How does our reaction to disasters today, like Katrina and anything else, compare to how ancient people responded to floods, quakes, and other natural events? We see today, we have more autonomy maybe, like we're a little bit more in action versus back then, we're a little bit more like, oh, no, it's a God. So, so that's one of the things. But again, we can talk about this later. Another question to ask yourselves, in Spiritism, how do we balance that personal responsibility with planetary trials that affect entire communities, right? Because some of these things really, they're going to take us out of our comfort zone. They're going to take us out of our belief systems. They're going to shake us up a little bit. And how do we balance that to make sure that, yes, I know I have these beliefs, but at the same time, that compassion, that kindness, that human aspect is super important to come out, right? So it is super, super important. This event was not a punishment. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of, right? It was part of a broader process of awakening our moral consciousness. How? Well, it forced us to kind of look at ourselves in front of that society mirror, right? Going back to the community members that were the most affected by it. We saw the visible disaster, right, with Katrina, that revealed that invisible moral imbalance. So Katrina sort of forces to confront that neglected suffering, especially about Black or minority communities in the US. It opened up national conversations on what? Environmental racism, government accountability, and dignity of the poor. Wow. Okay. So, yes, at that time, spirits were called to return to the spiritual world. Survivors were pushed into deep reflection as we are today in solidarity and rebuilding at that time. And humanity was given a chance to see with new eyes, right? Just as natural storms shake the land, spiritual storms shake our conscience. Okay, I'm gonna mute. Oh, Mateo, stop. Sorry. So, friends, it's important to understand that Spiritism, nor myself, never claiming that tragedies like Hurricane Katrina were punishment. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm gonna mute, and I'll be right back, and you guys can talk. Okay, he said he was gonna stop. I hope he does. Okay, let me go back. All right. So here, so this is not punishment. We don't have that anymore. Okay, we can't think like that either. It's not really that. We have free will, but we have to be reminded that the earth too, she has her own laws, right? I'm gonna call it by she, but she has her physical, geological, spiritual, and sometimes this kind of intersects painfully with human life. So sometimes, okay, we have to understand the Mother Earth too. She's also in her evolution. So we're kind of like all of this together. I feel like it's more like that, not focusing so much on that. I mean, but also in the beautiful aspect that comes after it. Oops. Okay. And we have to somehow, at our own time, it might not be this, if we're not there, that's fine, but eventually we understand these natural phenomena, they're not random. Okay, so they're not punishment, they're not random, but they're here for something. I know it sounds like we're not really finding an answer, but when we see it, we see it as energy. It changes it, right? We see that it's rebalancing the earth's energy. Just like we need to heal, we also need to understand Mother Earth, right? And we can see why the talk of climate change and all that's important. Okay, so for those impacted by Katrina, we cannot deny that was real suffering. Okay, and we honor that grief. Okay, we have to be there, compassionate, and be at that human level. At the same time, we have to build this trust that the spiritual world continues to guide, right? To receive and to support each soul, whether incarnated or disincarnated, they were received. So those lives that unfortunately, not just through Katrina, but maybe another natural disaster, we know that on the other side, they have loads and loads of spiritual support. Just to cross-reference, just for that, just because it came to my mind right now. Like we know in No Solar, right? When world was going on, they knew that was going to happen. They weren't happy about it. They were like, no. But well, as humans, we also have free choice. So even though the word's a little bit different than the natural phenomena, but the concept is the spirits were ready to intervene on the other side. So that brings us some hope, but again, it's still very tough to talk about. So let's kind of wrap this up just to kind of see how both the Katrina and the newer cases and what this means with the spiritist questions, right? So let me read this or else I'll go on a tangent. And we're limited on time. What time is it? Oh my God. Okay, I'm almost done. So when Katrina struck, it felt like chaos, right? Spiritism teaches us in questions 539, but these natural events are going to be carried out by innumerable spirits in many ways, working together, right, for a purpose God has. And since ancient times, we have sensed those invisible forces through floods, storms, mysterious visitors. They call them gods, but we learned today they're probably spirits that were evolved coming from um, different parts of the universe. Okay, so whether instinctive or intelligently, every spirit played a role in this great harmony of creation, moving from simple agents of nature to guides of this moral world. And as we see, question 541 is going to remind us that spirits can act with or more or less clarity depending on the level of evolution. Question 45, right? And we can see when Katrina happened, okay, since we have them, some people did great and some were a little selfish, right? So we can see how this sort of goes in there. Question 542 shows us that even suffering is often part of a larger educational design. In 545, we're reminded that all of nature is alive with spirits, right? Animals, the planet, the forces, the wind, the sea, nothing's in random. We're all interconnected. So when we face natural disasters today, let us try to be like, why is this happening to us? Or, why being asked to understand, to feel, Spiritism does not erase. As spiritists, we know that pain cannot be erased, but it offers a lens of meaning, right? Behind every storm, behind every shift, every loss, there is motion, there is purpose. And there's this quiet presence of spirits growing, guiding, evolving us. So now we're not going to read theirs, but just to kind of provoke if you all want to do your own studies. And I was super surprised and even went by region to see how it happens across the globe. That's basically it. It's not one region or anything. It's a global thing. And look at a lot of these events here from ancient times, right? To we go to Europe with the Irish potato famine, the Spanish flu. I mean, here's a Dust Bowl, Chernobyl disaster, the Rwanda genocides. We see how there's a lot of these in Brazil, the Amazon fires, right? We had COVID, that was huge. They all have a reflection. So if anything we learn, it's on us, to find that. But to be sensitive, like if somebody, honestly, because I was like, that was me. If somebody lost someone or has family history or is going through it, we have to be very careful how we speak. We cannot forget that human element. But at the same time, in the right time, we start to see that we are all connected and we're all growing, right? Bringing in some of these books. The big one, I think, that to remind us is Dibaldo Franco, The Planetary Transition. Okay, he was very blunt. About and with through Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. Right, it's a cleansing process on Earth. We need all of these because this is going to help us as we're going into that, new transitional planet. We need the Consolador, that same one too. There's a lot of talks about the role of nature, suffering, collective spiritual growth on the way to the light. It really does gives us a cosmic perspective of the Earth's spiritual journey. Okay, Emmanuel speaks of how higher spirits have guided us through all of this before. Thought in Life, it really talks about that inner transformation, which I think is super important because we see at first glance it's out there, but we can even say every natural phenomena might even have a spiritual. Again, being open to this. We don't have time for everything, but let's pick. Let me see, which one do we want to talk about? I mean, even what's going on right now in the world. There's so much with the fires. Okay, it's we could think of it like fire. What does fire symbolize? Purification, rebirth, right? And we start to see the collective, but even so, like even my spiritual part, if unfortunately or fortunately, you should be going through that. So as you can see, we won't have time for that. So I'm gonna stop sharing. But the next time we can go, because it wouldn't be a disservice if we had stopped, if we had not gone into depth, because really natural phenomena, they really do teach us a lot from the ancients. I loved how Kardec put that there because it's so beautiful. And then we can use the data and our experiences today. So, all right, I'm going to leave it. If you guys want me to put the questions back, or you're more than welcome to. All right. Or we're done, we're done. If it fits, it's fine. I'm going to mute.
Thank you, Nora. Indeed, a teacher. Thank you for all the knowledge and the way that you beautifully explained to us. Very informative, bringing to light really important concepts for us to think about it, reflect about it, food for thought and action, as we say here. Any of you guys have any comments for Nora, please?
I wanted to